In television and in life, it's evolve or die. And while some in the media, like Sunny Hostin of The View, don't seem to understand that evolutionary concept, there are others, even over at MSNBC, who apparently do. Even the co anchors of MSNBC's Morning Joe understand that TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, while entertaining for a season, is now no longer palatable viewing for most news watchers. They understand that the very small segment of the population that is still interested in watching their shrill Trump hating program, predominantly white liberals who still wear COVID masks, well, they won't keep the lights on. Here comes the humble pie and the white flag of surrender.
Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
We're here to report on him and to hopefully provide you insights that are going to better equip all of us in understanding these deeply unsettling times.
So how do you go from calling Trump a fascist and a Nazi to then just a couple weeks later scooting down to Mar-a-Lago with your tails between your legs to meet with the fascist Nazi? Well, it's simple. Ratings, job security, and money. Those things will always be more important to those types than integrity. And it's not because they ever thought Trump was truly a fascist or a Nazi. That bit was for ratings, job security, and money too. It's all an act. But nevertheless, Mika and Joe's act will evolve because they're smart enough to know it has to. Sunny, well, she's not that smart.
Look, the bottom line is that America needs a free press that is willing to speak truth to power right now, more than ever. And I think that we have to be very clear-eyed when we think about the president-elect and cover the president-elect. And I don't think you need to sit down for 90 minutes at Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring to be able to speak truth and to be able to cover a story. So maybe they're not journalists in the true sense. Maybe they're saying that they're opinion journalists. But we have to remember that Trump is the guy who ushered in the era of fake news.
Cry more. Sunny is going all in on the TDS, and that's quite the gamble for her and quite frankly for ABC. Joining me now with his take on this and more is OutKick writer Bobby Burack. Bobby, it's great to see you. I have to ask, whose side are you on here? Are you on Morning Joe's side? They went down to Mar-a-Lago. They want to facilitate a conversation. Or are you on Sunny Hostin's side, who, at least to her credit, is maybe pointing out some of the phoniness from those in the mainstream media? It's a real Sophie's choice here.
Well, so if you were to ask me a couple weeks ago, I would have said the two most nauseating people on TV are Sunny Hostin and Joe Scarborough. So it's a bit hard to choose, but I will say, I think I'm on the side of Sunny, not because I have any respect for her, I don't, but at least she's staying authentic to her bigotry. Maybe she actually was ill enough to believe Trump was Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini. Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, they're just frauds. So I would rather somebody be a bigot and authentic to themselves than just be a grifter.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think over on the MSNBC side, the ratings are really necessitating a lot of these moves here. It's like, listen, we can't keep going all in on this. I think everybody is in danger over there. I don't know what The View plans to do. We've heard reports, as you've written about, that they want to bring in more conservative voices. But every time they bring in a conservative voice, it's an anti-Trump conservative voice. So it's somebody that might be a card-carrying Republican, but they hate Donald Trump. That seems to be the litmus test over there. Like, you can be a conservative, but you must also hate Trump. I can't imagine that they would actually open their doors to somebody who was a conservative and also had a favoritism towards Donald Trump. I just don't ever see that happening. Best of luck to the ladies over there on The View. It's quite frankly unwatchable at this point. I don't know who would still watch that daytime television show. But I'm wondering, too, to that point, how much do you think media in general is going to evolve over these next 4 years?
I think substantially. We saw for the past 4 years, the legacy media threw everything they had essentially trying to stop Donald Trump from winning the presidency, lie after lie, hoax after hoax, fake news over and over again. They weren't even hiding their bias anymore. They let it know. We saw during the ABC debate, David Muir didn't care if you thought he was on Harris' side. He was, and he embraced it. And this industry doesn't have an ounce of credibility left. Coming into the election, Tommy, the news media was the least trusted profession among American voters. There was more trust in Congress than there was the legacy news media. And it's only going to get harder, not just because they've lost credibility, but because it's hysterical, it's boring, it's repetitive. And the online media took a major step up in the following months before the election. You saw Donald Trump sit down with Theo Von, Joe Rogan, the Nelk Boys, Bussing with the Boys, OutKick quite a few times. And that's where young voters and even a lot of voters under 50 are turning to. So shows like The View and 60 Minutes, they've lost so much influence that at this point, they're just screaming amongst each other. Moderate viewers don't trust them anymore. They're just holding on to that base, which is older, as you said, white people who have already made up their minds. I think a show like The View is going to see record declines from now until 2028 unless they change things drastically. And I don't think they will. ABC doesn't actually want to put a real true conservative on the desk because, oh, by the way, the ladies on there, they're not that smart. Can you imagine if you put an actual conservative who had their facts right on that desk? It would be over instantly.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, in some sense. I think it would make for better television if they actually brought a conservative in. Barbara Walters, when she created The View, that's what she wanted it to be. She wanted it to be a meeting of the minds, but she also wanted it to be political, but it was also entertainment. It was lifestyle. Like, I grew up actually watching The View. I would record it and watch it after school. I just enjoyed it. Not for the political hot takes necessarily, but I enjoyed just the lifestyle stuff. Like, I enjoyed watching them. I thought that they were, an interesting group of ladies. They had their political opinions, but it wasn't completely driven by politics. And then it started to shift, of course, with Elizabeth Hasselbeck and the disputes that they had there, them walking out on Bill O'Reilly, among others. And it just started to become hyper political, but only one-sided. And then they try to bring in people like Candace Cameron Bure, who might be like a traditional conservative in the sense that she's faith-based, but she's not necessarily like a Trump supporter, and she doesn't have the political chops to really go toe-to-toe. And then you had Meghan McCain, who, she fought a good fight in some cases, but she was also anti-Trump. And then you've got this Alyssa Farah Griffin, whatever. I don't trust people with three names anyway. But you have her who hates Donald Trump, and so they were willing to bring her on. And I just don't know where they go from here. But best of luck to them. We don't actually really care that much what happens to the situation over on The View. I actually care much more about what's going to happen in the coming months. And that's why I also want to get your take from a media perspective on the hysteria surrounding the Trump appointments and the Trump cabinet picks. You think there's any chance someone like a Matt Gaetz actually gets through the process?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. The Hill had a report today about the 9 Republican senators that say they're going to vote against them. And it's the usual suspects: Murkowski, Suzanne Collins. I mean, you can go through the list. No real surprises. But I do think this is going to be an interesting test where Trump is going to find out exactly where a lot of these Republican senators stand, because publicly a lot of them back Donald Trump. But, Tommy, a lot of them are not telling the truth. I think there's a lot more Nikki Haley Republicans in D.C. than we realize. And I want Trump to weed them out and see exactly who they are, because the Democrats are one thing, but the neocons, the establishment Republicans, are a lot of times just as bad. So I hope he can find out who they are. But the media coverage of this cabinet has been so predictable and so nauseating. Look, I know Pete Hegseth, as do you. I know his 2 co-hosts very well. This idea that he's a white supremacist should be defamation. He's not. He's the furthest thing from that. His tattoo is of a Jerusalem cross, not a Nazi symbol. And they're saying he's unqualified. Look, what makes Donald Trump so appealing to the vast majority of Americans, and I'm actually writing a column on this that will be out tomorrow, is that he appeals to ordinary people because ordinary people are so disconnected from establishment politicians. So when you bring in an outsider as a president, of course Trump is going to benefit himself by bringing in outsiders like a Pete Hegseth, who I think would do a phenomenal job as defense secretary. And I hope he makes it through because he's the right guy for the job. My main gripe for President Trump during his first term was he surrounded himself by a lot of bad faith actors like Jim Bolton and Mike Pompeo, to name a few. So I love the moves he made, but I'm going to be very curious to see how Gates and Hegseth fare during the senatorial process.
Yeah. I, for one, actually like Mike Pompeo. I think there were others that were bad choices, but I'm a fan of Mike Pompeo. I think he's a great guy. I don't know some of the backroom conversations. I do like Mike Pompeo, though. I will put that out there. I do want to ask you, though, like, quite honestly, you know, I'm a very honest person. I don't really care if the Trump supporters get mad at me. I've long since abandoned, like, an allegiance, you know, at all costs. So I will say, here's my concern with Matt Gaetz. Not so much the salacious stuff, not so much is he qualified, does he have the legal chops to do it? I'm not really so much worried about that. Here's what I'm worried about. Matt Gaetz is somebody who likes attention. Matt Gaetz is somebody who likes attention on himself. I don't want to have a DOJ or a justice system that is run purely for the spectacle. And that is my concern. I don't want him to make himself the story. And I don't think that the average Americans, to your point, that voted for Donald Trump because they want him to get things back in line. Yes, they want to root out corruption. They want to stop the weaponization of the justice system, among other things, in federal government. But I think that they want somebody who's just going to get to work behind the scenes and root out the tumor. And I have a little bit of concern that Matt Gaetz might make it about himself and showboating more so than just doing the work. That is my concern. I'm wondering if you can see, you know, any sort of semblance of where I'm coming from in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I'm not super worried usually when Trump supporters get mad. They were mad at both of us early on. We talked about how their messaging was poor on some women's issues in July. So we're in the same boat there. Yeah, I mean, we talked to different people in Washington who are connected to the GOP, and a lot of people are still very frustrated about how Gaetz handled the speaker situation. They thought that he was trying to make a scene to help himself, to make himself a celebrity. I had a lot of people said this was a self-serving prophecy from Matt Gaetz. So I'm with you. I mean, the allegations, I don't know what to believe. I don't trust many people now. So until I see facts, it's really hard to make a judgment. But when it comes to doing what's best for the American people and those ordinary voters whom we were just speaking of, I agree. I don't know that Matt Gaetz is the guy for that. There are some things I like about Gaetz as being fearless. But when it comes to getting the job done, is he going to be an efficient attorney general? That I don't know. And I share those same concerns as you.
Do you think that there's a possibility that the Gaetz thing is supposed to ruffle feathers and it's supposed to be maybe kind of a distraction and Gaetz doesn't get through, but then the second choice, who might also be controversial but is far less controversial than Matt Gaetz, gets through because Gaetz was so controversial? I happen to think that maybe that's the play.
Yeah, it very well could be, right? It's like when you bring home somebody to show your parents the first time, and it's like, well, she's a bit crazy, but the next one I'm going to bring is going to look like an angel because she's not like Sabrina, right? That old saying. It might be a little bit like that, where whoever he picks after Gaetz is far more likely to get passed through the Senate. But it is hard to imagine that Gaetz gets sworn in. I mean, look, the Republicans have a majority, but it's still, it's still only 4 votes. So I don't think I would bet on him getting through. And I think your theory that the next person is going to look so much better makes a lot of sense. I think Trump, as a businessman, knows how to play the game and work emotions.
Yeah, and I love that point because he's a businessman. So sometimes when you're negotiating, you say, okay, I want X amount, and then you negotiate, higher than you actually think you're going to get. So then you meet somewhere around where you actually want. And you know what? I believe that maybe that's the strategy. And quite frankly, personally, I hope it is. I want to move on now, though, to some other discussions about things that are going on, conversations that are being had in media and in D.C. Listen, I think the left largely lost a lot of the maybe moderate, on the fence, suburban women voters because of all the trans woke issues. I think parents kind of rejected that, and it played a bigger role than maybe even some are willing to admit in this past election. But, I want to get your take on the left because they don't seem to have understood that concept. Here's Jen Psaki on a little bit of a tirade about how we need to make sure that trans issues are front and center. Take a look at this.
These ads created this perception that the issues of trans kids playing sports was dominating schools across the country, which is completely false. Some people got pulled into that argument. But if that were actually an issue at thousands of schools across the country, it would be worthy of a debate. But there are just incredibly few examples of transgender girls playing in youth sports. And when we see those examples, there isn't evidence that these kids are a threat to safety or fairness. When I say few examples, I mean that if you were to count the examples of transgender girls playing youth sports in any single state, the number often rounds to 0.
Oh, so basically what Jen Psaki is saying is that if there's only a few girls on a few teams who get beat out by a man or they have to stare at a penis in their locker room, those people, they just don't matter. But you know what does matter? The 1% of the population who identifies as trans, who their feelings seemingly are more important than the rest of us. I love her logic there. What do you make of it? And do you think the left is going to keep going down this rabbit hole?
Yeah, and it is such, speaking of business, bad business for them to push this topic. They spend so much time talking about trans rights, but there's only like 1% who are actually trans, and then they spend all their time talking about it. It's a very, very bizarre thing. It seems like they're trying to escalate this movement exponentially. But I'm with you, Tommy. Jen Psaki the other day was saying how trans issues are just a right-wing culture war distraction. That's not true. According to several different polls, including a New York Times Siena poll, 73% of Americans do not want men playing sports with women in the name of transgenderism. 73% means a lot of those respondents are also Democratic voters. This is not a right versus left culture war issue. This is normal Americans versus far left Americans who think this stuff is right. And to be honest, I don't care about the exact number right now. That's like saying, well, only a few people are dying of opioids, so we'll just ignore it. Oh, by the way, 5 years later, now it's a national crisis. You let this type of stuff fester, all of a sudden, we are going to have locker rooms all across America filled with confused males now saying they're women showering with little girls. That cannot happen. That's completely unreasonable. A lot of ways gross and unnecessary. So her excuse that it's only a small percentage is very weak and tone deaf, because this is the same side that dismissed the opioid crisis as just a small minority of Americans.
They also tell us that the illegal aliens that are killing Americans, it's not that big of a deal because it's only a few who are brutally raped and murdered.
Right.
Listen, we must protect the illegal aliens at all costs. We must protect the thugs and the felons and the men who play sports against women. We must protect those individuals at all costs. But the average person out there, the everyday American, screw them, right? Next thing I want to talk about, though, in that same vein, is Nancy Mace, who I believe just yesterday introduced this resolution on Capitol Hill. She wants, on the Capitol, she doesn't want men, biological men, to be using the female restroom. She has a reason behind this. I want to play the clip and get your take.
I'm not going to stand for a man, if someone with a penis is in the women's locker room, that's not okay. And I'm a victim of abuse myself. I'm a rape survivor. I have PTSD from the abuse I've suffered at the hands of a man. And I know how vulnerable women and girls are in private spaces. So I'm absolutely 100% going to stand in the way of any man who wants to be in a women's restroom, in our locker rooms, in our changing rooms. I will be there fighting you every step of the way.
What do you think the chances are something like this passes?
I'm hopeful because I saw the reaction to this. I believe it was the Delaware Congresswoman-elect go after her, saying that it's this monstrous and transphobic. No, it's not. It's actually pro-woman, which the Democrats claim they were for many, many decades, but now apparently women are further down the hierarchy of victimhood from trans people. But I mean, this is a story, again, that you tell somebody 5 years ago that this is a discussion, they would say, well, what's the discussion? Obviously, men should not be in women's restrooms. So the fact that there are any people actually arguing against it and saying that this bill is bigoted and transphobic, it just shows you how out of touch and lost these Democratic politicians are. And they're so beholden to identity politics and identity that they're actually going to use resources to try to fight this stuff, actually go on MSNBC and say, we support men using the same bathrooms as women. That is as detached from reality as any political stance that I've seen in a long time.
And they're going to keep losing. if they continue to push that forward. But you mentioned detachment. I don't think there's anybody in America more detached than President Joe Biden. We have a video of him seemingly wandering into the Amazon rainforest. Now, I don't know. They're probably going to tell us he was heading somewhere. He was going to go talk to a bug, maybe a leaf. I don't know if they're going to tell us that he was fighting climate change by touching foliage. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to rationalize this. I feel bad for the man. I mean, my God, but it's really hard to cover for this at this point. And, you know, he's only got a couple months left. Like, if he wants to wander into the Amazon rainforest, let him. My concern is this. He or someone on his behalf is also authorizing major moves internationally that could lead to World War III. And there you have the guy that's supposedly in charge wandering into the forest. Bobby, what do we do with this?
Yeah, detachment is an astute way to put it. Everybody knows this guy wasn't fit to run for re-election, but he's certainly not fit to be in office. The fact that he's still in control, kind of, at least in name, is so concerning to me. You watch him walk and talk, and he just seems like he is lost in space, has no idea what's going on, and there's no way he's making decisions. So that begs the question, well, who actually has their finger on the lever? Who is the person who can push the button or prevent us from World War III? I don't know who that answer is. I think we all have ideas about who's actually running this country, but it's certainly not that guy. And you mentioned you feel bad for him. I do too, although he was such a bad president that I almost don't have as much sympathy for him. I think as far as I'm concerned, he's the second worst president ever behind James Buchanan. I think he's been that awful. Just overall, he wrecked this country, wrecked the border, wrecked the economy, was awful on foreign relations. So to see him go out like this is actually somewhat fitting, but it's also frightening because he does not deserve to be running a little baseball team, let alone the most powerful country in the entire world.
Yeah, and you know, I will say this, the most lucid and excited we have seen him is when he was sitting down across from President Trump, and I would bet the farm that he voted for Donald Trump. I think he hates Kamala. I think Jill hates Kamala. I think everyone hates Kamala. So I guess we'll just leave it there. Best of luck to Joe. I hope he found his way out of the rainforest. Best of luck to him in these next couple of months, that he can just stay on track. Just stay on track, Joe, because you know what? As much as I don't think Joe's up to the job, I know Kamala's not up to the job. So let's just hope and pray that he's able to hold on. Bobby, thank you for jumping on with me today. Always appreciate it. Everyone can check out your articles, of course, on OutKick.com. You do great work. Also follow you on X. We always appreciate you standing in as a member of our OutKick family, and I'll talk to you soon.
Tommy, appreciate it. Talk soon.
All righty. Folks, I wish I loved anything as much as Democrats love shielding criminal illegal aliens at the expense of the American people. It's time for Final Thoughts. There are many millions of people in this country who should not be here. And of those millions, there are tens of thousands who are indeed murderers and rapists and traffickers and abusers and monsters. But lucky for them, Democrats have proudly vowed to protect them from deportation.
Would you, as governor, allow state police and National Guard to carry out mass deportations?
We will not be participating in misguided efforts that harm our communities, and I've been incredibly clear about that.
What will Boston's response be if these mass deportations take place?
Yeah, look, elections have consequences, and the federal government is responsible for a certain set of actions, and no individual city can reverse or override some parts of that. But what we can do is make sure that we are doing our part to protect our residents in every possible way, that we are not cooperating with those efforts that actually threaten the safety of everyone by causing widespread fear.
We, of course, are deeply concerned about, the President of the United States calling out military inside the United States, where people are peaceful, even if there may be people who are undocumented. But the idea of calling out, the Army into the domestic confines of the United States seems uncalled for and may in fact be unconstitutional and illegal.
Imagine being so tone deaf and stupid as an elected official. You would seriously go on camera and proudly announce you're going to shield criminal illegal aliens from deportation. It's truly unfathomable. The American people want illegals out. The American people support mass deportation and for damn sure want criminal illegals out first. And these mayors and these governors want to protect them? Well, there's your campaign ad to vote Republican for eternity, my friends. And when you dig a little deeper, and it doesn't take much digging, you realize your tax dollars are funding, aiding, and abetting in the rapes and murders of your fellow Americans. Here's the roommate of Laken Riley's suspected killer, an illegal alien, of course, testifying to my very point.
How did you get to Athens?
¿Y cómo llegaron a Athens?
En Nueva York pedimos en Manhattan.
In New York, we asked in Manhattan.
En el Hotel Roosevelt.
And Hotel Roosevelt.
De Manhattan pedimos un vuelo humanitario aquí hasta Atlanta.
In Manhattan, we requested for a humanitarian flight to come here to Atlanta.
And when was that?
¿Y cuándo fue eso?
Como el de 9 a 10 de septiembre.
Around the 9th, 10th of September.
Your flippin' tax dollars were used to fly an illegal alien gang member to Georgia, where just months later he's accused in standing trial for her brutal murder of Laken Riley. This crap right here is a major reason Donald Trump was elected 3 weeks ago, and yet Democrat city and state leaders are puffing their chests, bragging about how they're going to thwart deportation efforts and help shield illegals from the law. And guess what else is oh so rich? These liberals are really complaining about how much it'll cost to deport the rapists and murderers out of the country because apparently the Biden-Harris travel agency just provides a one-way ticket at our expense with our money and our lives at stake. There's good news, though. January is coming. Donald Trump is coming. Tom Homan is coming. And these liberal leaders who are truly accessories to rape and murder will not be able to stop it. Your country is going to be safe again. If it makes Democrat enablers uncomfortable, that's too bad. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Americans are going to come first in our own country again. You made the right choice on November 5th. Those are my final thoughts. Please be sure to watch the show, of course, every Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern here on OutKick.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Until tomorrow from Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.